Go.
All right, full swing. Episodes 5 and 6. There's one I want to get to quick. It's episode 6,
Okay.
but let's quickly touch on the younger Fitzpatrick brother and all that is the brotherly love in the Fitzpatrick household. What did you think of the episode?
Well, let me start by asking you a question. How much do you care about Matt Fitzpatrick to care about his brother? Any? Like, it's not like Brooks. I'd be much more interested in a Brooks and Chase Koepka episode than I would a Fitzpatrick episode. But I'm a golf nut, so I enjoyed it. If that's what you need to
I'm
hear.
surprised that's the direction the producers went. I thought there were some other storylines they may have chased down, especially after seeing the episode. I was like, that's fun. But
It was. I felt like the Tom Kim episode. Man, it was fun. Saw
yeah,
some things I usually don't see. I knew of Alex Fitzpatrick just because there was some. I knew he won a Challenge Tour event. I was surprised to see his name, and really, what I remember about him. So I first saw him swing a club. This has got to be a year and a half ago. I thought he had a better swing than Matt. Matt's kind of got this handsy swing, and it looks like it's a lot of timing, and it is. I thought Alex had a really good move, a little more shallow move than what Matthews is, and um, but clearly he's in the shadow, and that was compelling. It was compelling to hear a brother talk openly about feeling caught in his big brother, successful brother's shadow. It also was kind of cool to see Matt Fitzpatrick, who clearly was kind of like the nerd growing up, like it seems like a really, and we talked about him before, like sitting in front of like, I forget, some Premier League soccer team, taking questions and being introduced as the US Open champion. Like, good on that dude. Like seeing his beautiful wife, like that dude is not, if he is a, a elementary school teacher from, Birmingham, that dude is probably not marrying the fiance he has. So good on him.
wow, that's a bold that you're really stepping on a limb there, Josh, with the professional athlete outkicks his coverage. Thank you for that commentary.
Way outkicked his coverage. I thought it was a good episode, and it reminded me of two things. One, how difficult that Open was last year, and how well those guys played in that tournament, because the weather was tough, and that's a tough golf course, as you know. And the fact that he was in the third to last group, Alex Fitzpatrick, he only shot 72 in the final round. He was two over par, which seemed like pretty good in those conditions, and he still dropped like 10 spots to show you how good that tournament was last year. But just a good reminder of how good and how thin the line is between good and great in professional golf. Because man, that dude is a really, really good golfer. Um, but it's a long way to great.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's the thin line of good and great, and good on him for grinding. I'm an only child, so I don't necessarily have that sibling rivalry. Uh, but it had to have been sweet, sweet victory for him in that Open to just really smoke his brother like on the biggest stage.
And that kind of reminds me, that this year's swing, it kind of validated the word I'm trying to use, that this season's full swing is ahead of last season's just because they're hitting. That's just a much more compelling story, even though it's not on par with some of the other ones we've seen this season. I mean, but to get that story with him beating his brother at the Open and following both of them, because again, while they're shooting it, they don't know what's going to happen. They're kind of working on and producing the story. They have them at New Orleans, so clearly they had this cooking. Um, to see them land the plane, it's a pretty impressive job of production, if nothing else. It shows that
Yep.
this show really cares about the product. And even though it's not the best episode of the season, it's still probably better than six of the eight episodes from last season.
Yeah, they lucked out, right? If
Yeah,
if
that's it.
if Alex misses the cut at the Open, it's they're probably going with another storyline they've got on the back burner.
That's right. And they probably do have like 12, and they had to pick eight. But it also reminded me, luck plays a part. Wyndham winning the U.S. Open for them while they were covering him is a pretty lucky stroke because that dude was like 108 in the world. So a good episode. A good solid. I'm going to give it a Bridgestone golf ball, but I'm not going out and buying a sleeve of them.
Yeah, this was a top flight for me. Just it's the worst of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's why at least Tom Kim had me walking through the champions locker room at Augusta National, which was just,
That's it.
it was heart stopping. It was like watching the final scene of Top Gun Maverick. I couldn't get over it. I watched it 4 times. I couldn't breathe. Tom Kim stumbling through the champions locker room. All right. I know that's not the episode you want to talk about. Let's get down to it.
All right. So now we're getting into this, what I've been quietly referencing since we started these reviews, what I think are the best episodes in the series, whether it be season 1, season 2. And it should be, right? We're getting into the Ryder Cup. But oh man, this. So for the listeners that haven't watched it yet, what we're doing is we're now setting up the Ryder Cup picks. And it's really focused on the point system, how the players are picked. But it's really boiling down to JT versus Keegan Bradley for the last slot on the team. That's what this is all about at this point. I mean, I want to jump all over the episode because there's so many things that really make me angry, right? And let me start with this, my takeaway, is if you've watched that episode, we now have the ability to know the outcome. Like, we already know JT makes the team.
Right.
Keegan
Hindsight's
doesn't.
a blessing here, right? To kind of know.
But like the worst acting job ever is JT acting like he doesn't know if he's going to make the team or not. And I think that the producers picked up on it, which is why some of the editing to me is such a subtle jab at Zach Johnson. And I'll get into why I think that. But what did you think overall?
So I didn't pick up on that, and I can't wait to hear you kind of tell me and lead me down that path of why you think JT was in the know that he was making that team. So I didn't get that impression. I definitely felt it was a jab at Zach Johnson. I think like there's some Zach Johnson moments that were not great in both episodes. I don't want to jump ahead to 7, but in 6 and 7, it just when Zach Johnson's sitting around, signing autographs in the rental house with JT. Oh, it's just so gross. Or when he's at dinner and you got Ricky and Jordan and JT there, and Jordan going, "So what are the odds that all 3 people in this room are going to be?" It just was so gross, and they included that for a reason because exactly what's going on. Like those dudes are saying, "Hey, we control the process, and you're our useful idiot." Is what I felt like what was happening there.
And the producer, the scene that I'm referencing is Keegan wins the Travelers.
Yes.
And he's celebrating. He walks off the green, and they actually have the clip of him leaning into his wife saying, "Do you want to go to Rome?"
Yeah.
And it then immediately cuts to that dinner scene between Zach Johnson, JT, Ricky, Jordan, sitting there chumming it up. I think they're at the PGA Championship is where they were all hanging out. And to me, that's the producers saying, it's not a fair fight.
Yeah, that's right. That's a really good point.
It's not a fair fight. And that's what made me so mad is because we know the outcome of the Ryder Cup. And to see the passion that Keegan Bradley, that's my big takeaway. I love Keegan. I'm a Keegan Bradley fan for life now.
Yeah, I'm too.
Like the passion that, like, he hadn't even unpacked his bag from what, 2014, 2016?
How about that revelation, right? That his wife's like, yeah, he just can't bring himself to unpack it. It's sitting there in the garage with all his shit in it from, 10 years ago.
I didn't, in my notes here, I didn't know the players cared that much about the Ryder Cup. Like, I knew they care about the majors.
They love the Ryder Cup. That's a huge deal.
But they loved it for, I thought they loved it for the pomp and circumstance, the parties, the traveling, the fans, the rowdy atmosphere. I didn't think they really, at the end of the day, cared too much about who won or lost. Like, they just had a good time. I mean, you see the pictures of these guys, they're drunk. They're hungover the next day. Keegan Bradley was like deeply disturbed that his last memory of the Ryder Cup was him giving up the clinching point. To the extent that, like, if you had told me, he was leading at the Masters heading into 16 and he blew it and he never really unpacked his bag from Augusta, but to tell me he did it from a Ryder Cup, I was like, oh my God, like, this guy cares. And yet Zach Johnson is like, nothing you didn't do, Keegan. But I got my boys here, and we're gonna go to Rome.
So
you're not.
I thought at the time he made a huge mistake not taking Keegan Bradley. It just felt like you needed someone in form. I thought the mistake was taking Sam Burns, but I understood I didn't think JT should have made it either. Frankly, I thought those were 2 bad picks. I understood JT more than I understood Sam Burns. But to not have Keegan Bradley on that team, I would have taken him ahead of Morikawa because McCallum wasn't playing great. I mean, Keegan won the Travelers. Um, and it was shocking to me watching this episode, knowing full well that Zach is much more contemporary of Keegan than he is of JT or Jordan Spieth, right? Zach is much more of the generation of Keegans, even though Zach's probably 10 years older, than he is of these younger guys who he seems to want to be liked. He wants to be liked by these guys. He wants to be on in the in club. I told my daughter who watched with me, and interesting that you brought up we know the outcome, because she did not know the outcome, and she watched these.
Okay, so let me jump in. That's a perfect. So, is someone, and maybe we need to get her on the pod, because as someone that didn't know the outcome, the way Full Swing, the producers edit this thing, is they're showing JT literally plummet. Every cut missed. Not just missed, Josh. Like, not even sniffing the cut line. Like, it would be safe to walk away if you didn't follow that season saying, this guy's one of the worst golfers on the planet. Like, and then he makes the team?
So, little spoiler, I did record a 10-minute segment with my daughter to pick her brain on what she thought of the Full Swing episodes and Go to the Valspar, which may or may not come at the end of this podcast. But she did say,
"Oh, thanks for sharing it with your co-host."
I didn't know but now I feel like I have to use the clip because of what you just said. But she made that point. Like, she did not know the outcome, and she started to sense like there's a great inequity here. There's something. They're setting this up the way you mentioned. I think she keyed into that. Like, she's like, he's not going to make it, is he? And I wasn't going to tell her. I didn't want to spoil it. But she's like, he's not going to make it, is he? She's talking about Keegan. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to watch. But she could sense the dread. She could feel the storm, how they're editing that and how they were shooting it. And ultimately, when she found out that it was not Keegan, she was pissed, because it did feel like he was deserving of the pick. And it did feel like, more importantly, there was a distinct bias that was directed towards Justin in particular, but even that young core, and Ricky didn't have a great season either, won a tournament, that wasn't being passed around to guys like Keegan. And it seemed unfair, because you know what? Frankly, most of us are Keegans and not Justins. Most of us feel on the outside looking in on most things in life. And so we can look at that and go, maybe on the scale that Keegan felt the disappointment, but man, the feeling that life isn't fair and there's always somebody who's just going to catch a break. It resonates with all of us, and that's what was really hit home with that episode.
And we'll have to tune in next week for when we break down Keegan's reaction, which I have a lot to say about.
And really, next week's episode, there's so much to talk about, because we can really get into the nuts and bolts of what went wrong at the Ryder Cup. But this episode was really interesting in the way they framed it, because I think you've made a great point. They knew what was happening, even though they had hindsight, and they edited in a way that led us to a path that maybe Zach was, and of course it's the right way, but he was certainly complicit in a little bit of insider trading, right?
I think if you watch that episode, you're crazy if you don't think that at the start of that tour season, JT had already been told he was going to make the team.
Well, he kind of.
I don't think there was any doubt. I think that was when I talk about bad acting. I think that JT's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it. But then you can't hide certain elements of that inner circle, and they're sitting like Jordan Spieth can't even keep a straight face when he's like, "Oh, JT, you'll be there or not?" Like, it's like
he could keep a straight face, and when they're in that closet signing the memorabilia, and JT's like, "Well, I got a brown nose," and he's like, "Well, I like a little brown nose. I got a free place to stay," and it's just like, oh, this is so gross, because you knew it was happening, and you knew it was going to happen, and it felt. When you saw Keegan's story and how much it meant to him, as you pointed out, it was clear. Even I didn't know how much it really, really meant to him, that losing those 2 cups set on him. But to hear him, tell his wife, we're going to go to Rome, or how about going to Rome, and to see how much to say that when he was walking up 18 to win the Travelers, which, by the way, is a big tournament, right? Quail Hollow, big event. It's a big deal to win the Travelers. And he's walking up the 18th fairway, and he's thinking about, if I win this, I'm almost a lock for the Ryder Cup. That's what he was thinking. He wasn't thinking like, I'm going to get $3 million. I'm not thinking my kids get to see me hoist a trophy, or he's thinking, this is my Ryder Cup ticket right here. That's how important it was to him. And then it just the leverage, the disappointment that he's going to feel when he doesn't make it. It's he must watch that episode back and want to break stuff or be hell bent on making the Ryder Cup team in 2025.
And well, if Tiger's the captain, tell you already who that team's going to be. But it was, and look, I'm not sitting here saying Keegan Bradley, he did himself no favors by his performance at the Open. Right, that would have made Zach Johnson's decision, although I am fully convinced his decision was made. If he goes out there and gets a top 10 finish and still gets left off the team, it just makes it that much worse.
Left off.
The fact that
I think Burns gets left off if that's the case. But you're right. But measure that against JT shooting, like you said, 81. Like, yeah, Keegan missed the cut, but your boy shot 81 at a major championship. That's insanity.
It's not like JT was showing flashes. And what kills me is JT then went on to have he didn't really lay any eggs at the Ryder Cup when it ended up happening, right? He was serviceable, but it was the principle alone that pissed me off more than anything. But man, listen, I'm all about building teams. Bill Belichick has a great quote hung in the locker room for years. It said, I'm not trying to find the best players. I'm trying to build the best team, right? And I get that aspect of building a Ryder Cup team, but I mean, you might as well have taken me to Rome.
Essentially, is what he did. I mean, he didn't take you to Rome, but he did not bring his best team to Rome. I really believe that in my heart. And I'm not saying Keegan's going to show up and outperform JT, but I do think Sam Burns, Ricky Fowler, who also were picks, those guys weren't in any sort of great form either going over there, and Keegan seemed to be. And he gave us, I don't know, we started a foot and a half behind the blocks, when the race, when the gun sounded to start the race. That's how I felt with his team selection.
And the polar opposite on Team Europe, right?
Let's save that for next week when we talk about Luke Donald, because I mean, even I found myself in episodes 7 and 8 rooting for Europe because I like that dude so much, and Justin Rose, and how different it felt watching them. And there's a reason that they beat our ass, right? Because they approach things differently in a way that is distinct to how they view team versus, unfortunately, how we've viewed team in America when it comes to the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, Luke Donald's wife caught me off guard.
Hard to watch an American woman cheer for Europeans, wasn't it? But she came out pretty good too. A lot of good wife stuff again. Like even Keegan's wife, man, just Keegan's classy wife. And really, just really good. Good work by Keegan's wife in this episode. Just really, really give credit to Keegan letting the cameras in, knowing what the end result could be and was, and to be able to still go that journey with him. I have a lot of respect for him.
Yep. Fun fact. I don't know if you've noticed this, Josh, but in every episode, these golfers, almost every one of them has a doodle.
It's a doodle. Am I ignorant? Am I embarrassing myself?
That is embarrassing to an extent. It's a dog.
Oh,
That's the type of dog. They all have doodles. Different variations, whether it be a Bernie doodle, an Irish doodle, a golden doodle, labradoodle, but they all have doodles.
That's the dog of the upper middle class, upper class white male. That is the dog of them. That is. I'm sorry.
Don't you talk about Mr. Duncan like that.
Your doodle. I know.
That's right, baby.
Well,
all right, but let's wrap up that episode. I think we might have given a little away. We kind of creeped into episode 7, but 7 and 8 next week is going to be really fun because I think they're the two best episodes. But I thought this episode was what's the best ball that Callaway makes?
Yeah, like a really good Chrome Soft. Yeah, I'm with you. Good golf ball.
Yeah,
for sure. I'd play it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it sets up the last two episodes very well. And again, hey, Zach, get some thicker skin, pal, because you did this to yourself. You let the cameras in, and it was a fixed game from the jump. And if I'm JT, I'm also. Let's end with this. That's tough to watch if you're JT too.
100%. Like, it's tough to watch for everybody. It's gonna be tough to watch for Zach. Like, yeah, I almost thought at the end of that episode, and I don't want to drag this on. I almost thought, like, man, I wonder if anybody's going to agree to do Full Swing next year, just because of this episode, the way it picked at raw nerves and the way they, and I think very fairly but smartly produced it. I wonder if those guys are like, we're not signing up next year. We're going to do like the Max Homa thing and just like we're going to backburner this. We don't want to be that out of control of our image. So,
yep. Right.
Quick pick. Any Sweet 16 your favorites going to the Final Four for you? National championship favorites?
I love Creighton, but man, I'll tell you what. Watching Purdue's on a mission. Purdue
as a Big Ten guy, that's hard to hear. But you might be right.
Oh,
well, I think we might be cruising for a showdown between Purdue and UConn at some point. I just think that they seem like to be on a collision course.
Those two bigs for Purdue are just. I don't know how you're gonna be. It's gonna take a perimeter team like Creighton who's just gonna be able to lay threes all day, and they're gonna have to be hot.
That was a great game the other night. That Creighton game was unbelievable. So, all right, on that note, Michael, we'll recover next week. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit Masters fantasy draft, and then we will examine episodes 7 and 8, and we'll have a special guest here as we wrap up the E9 podcast. We'll see you next week, Mike.
Have a good one.